In April 2024, a single drone strike on a Red Sea shipping lane caused insurance premiums for cargo vessels to spike by 300% overnight. Not 30%, 300%. Nobody bombed New York, nobody bombed London, nobody even fired at a G7 country. But in 48 hours, the cost of moving goods from Asia to Europe jumped enough that companies started rerouting ships around the entire continent of Africa, adding 14 days and millions of dollars per journey. That's the part they don't put in the history books. Wars don't just destroy things, they reprogram the entire global economy. They decide who eats and who doesn't. They decide which currencies survive and which ones turn into wallpaper. They decide which countries get rich and which ones spend the next 30 years paying off debt. And right now, in 2026, we're sitting inside what economists are quietly calling the most economically combustible geopolitical environment since 1939. This is not hyperbole. This is the math. Let's establish something first. When most people think about war and the economy, they think about two things. Oil prices go up, stock market goes down. That's it. That's the whole mental model most people carry around. It's not wrong, it's just embarrassingly incomplete. Because war doesn't just move prices, it restructures trade routes, destroys supply chains that took decades to build, triggers currency collapses, forces governments into debt spirals, reshuffles who controls the world's critical resources, and, this part is key, it creates entirely new economic winners in places you'd never expect. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Finland's defense industry stock prices doubled in a week. Not because Finland was at war, because suddenly everyone realized Finland shared a 1,340-kilometer border with Russia and probably needed more weapons. That's how modern war economics work. The ripples travel faster than the missiles. So today, we're going to trace those ripples. We're going to follow the money through 5 wars and 3 economic crises, and then we're going to zoom in on what's happening right now in Iran, in the Middle East, in global oil markets, and we're going to show you the uncomfortable math about what 2026 might actually look like. Here's the simplest way to understand how war moves an economy. Think of global trade as a massive river system. Goods flow down these rivers constantly. Oil from the Gulf, microchips from Taiwan, grain from Ukraine, clothing from Bangladesh. Every country on Earth is either drawing water from this system or dumping water into it. War is a dam. When a war breaks out anywhere near a critical choke point, a strait, a shipping lane, a pipeline corridor, it doesn't just slow the water, it backs it up. Pressure builds, and that pressure doesn't disappear, it redirects. And redirection costs money, always. The Strait of Hormuz is the single most important choke point in the global oil system. Every single day, approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass through a stretch of water that at its narrowest point is only 33 kilometers wide. That's roughly 21% of the world's total oil consumption, every day. Iran controls one side of that strait. Let that sit for a moment. During the 2019 tanker attacks, when Iran was suspected of mining vessels in the Gulf, oil prices jumped 15% in 24 hours. The attacks lasted days, the price effect lasted months. This is what economists call a risk premium. The market isn't just paying for oil, it's paying for the possibility that the oil doesn't arrive. That possibility alone, not an actual disruption, just the fear of one, costs the global economy billions. Now compound that. Add a ground war, add sanctions, add retaliatory drone strikes, add a regional conflict that pulls in proxy forces from 3 different countries, add social media footage of burning tankers playing on every trader's second monitor. That's not a risk premium anymore. That's a full economic restructuring event. Let's talk about Iran, specifically what happened in 2024 and what it means for 2026. In April 2024, Iran launched a direct missile and drone attack on Israel, over 300 projectiles. It was the first direct Iranian military strike on Israeli soil in history. The world held its breath for about 48 hours, waiting to see if this would escalate into a full regional war. It didn't, at least not immediately. But here's what that event quietly did to the global economy. Oil prices spiked, gold hit record highs, briefly touching $2,400 an ounce. The dollar strengthened as investors fled to safety. Regional currencies in the Middle East wobbled, and shipping companies quietly began rerouting their highest value cargo away from the Persian Gulf. All of that happened without a single oil well being damaged, without a single tanker being hit. The attack failed militarily, but economically it succeeded in doing something important. It reminded the market that the Persian Gulf is one bad decision away from becoming uninsurable. Now add what happened next in the Red Sea. The Houthi attacks on commercial shipping, backed, equipped, and guided by Iran, forced a rerouting of global trade at a scale not seen since the Suez Crisis of 1956. The extra distance? Roughly 6,000 nautical miles. The extra time? About 2 weeks per journey. The extra cost? Hundreds of millions of dollars per month, spread across the supply chains of almost every consumer product you own. And this wasn't even a war. This was a proxy conflict, a regional group with Iranian weapons operating off the coast of Yemen, grinding down global trade efficiency while the world's superpowers argued about how to respond. That's the new normal. Wars don't need to be declared. They just need to be close enough to a critical choke point. Now here's the part that doesn't make the news. Every war creates losers, that's obvious. But every war also creates winners, and the winners are almost never the countries doing the fighting. Follow the money from the Iran crisis backward, and you find it flowing into 5 places. First, U.S. defense contractors. In 2024, Lockheed Martin's stock hit all-time highs. Raytheon, which makes the Patriot missiles being used to intercept Iranian drones, reported record revenue. The company that makes the missile and the company that makes the thing the missile destroys are often traded on the same stock exchange, managed by the same asset managers, and owned by the same retirement funds. Somewhere, a 67-year-old schoolteacher in Ohio is profiting from Middle Eastern missile strikes through her pension plan. Nobody talks about that. Second, alternative oil producers. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the United States, and Norway all quietly benefit from Iran's instability. When Iranian oil gets sanctioned off the market, everyone else's oil becomes more valuable. The math is brutal and simple. Third, currency safe havens. The Swiss franc, the Japanese yen, gold, and U.S. treasuries all surge during geopolitical crises. Countries that issue these assets or dominate these markets effectively collect a fear tax every time a conflict escalates somewhere in the world. The dollar alone has generated trillions in what economists call seigniorage benefits from its role as the world's crisis currency. Fourth, reconstruction contractors. The companies that rebuild what wars destroy are often the same ones that lobbied quietly for the policies that started the conflict. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a documented cycle with a 70-year track record. And fifth, the most underrated winner of any war, the country that stays neutral and keeps selling. In World War I, the United States supplied both sides until it finally entered in 1917. By the time the war ended, America had gone from being a debtor nation to the world's largest creditor. It didn't win the war that made it a superpower. It won by not entering it for 3 years. India is quietly playing this game right now, buying discounted Russian oil, refining it, and selling the refined products to Europe, which can't buy Russian products directly due to sanctions. Completely legal, economically genius, neutrally diplomatic. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. We're now entering what economists, the World Bank, and several major investment banks are in careful, measured, professional language, describing as a period of extreme fragility. Let me translate that from economist to English. They're scared. The numbers going into 2026 are genuinely alarming if you look at them all together. Global debt has reached $315 trillion. That's a number so large it stopped feeling real. To put it in context, if you spent $1 million every single day since the birth of Jesus Christ, you still wouldn't have spent $1 trillion yet.
We have 315 of them. Interest rates, while slightly declining, remain at their highest sustained levels in 15 years, which means governments are paying more to service that debt than at any point in recent memory. The U.S. alone is spending more on interest payments than on its entire defense budget. Think about that. Meanwhile, the Middle East remains a match sitting next to a gas can. If Iran either closes the Strait of Hormuz or becomes the subject of a major military strike from Israel, from the United States, or triggered by a miscalculation during one of the dozens of proxy engagements happening across the region, the economic consequences would be immediate and catastrophic. Goldman Sachs modeled this in 2024. Their finding? A sustained Hormuz closure just 1 month could push oil prices to $150 a barrel.
And that's before you factor in what happens to developing economies, nations like Pakistan, Egypt, Sri Lanka, and dozens of others who are already in IMF bailout programs, already running on economic fumes. Don't survive a $150 oil world without catastrophic social upheaval. Food prices spike, import costs become impossible to manage, currencies collapse, and political instability follows economic collapse like night follows day. We've seen this movie before. The Arab Spring was partly triggered by food price inflation caused by droughts and commodity speculation. A new energy shock of this magnitude would make that look mild. Now, here's where we need to be honest about what we don't know. The world has a long and impressive track record of catastrophes that were predicted and never happened. Economists have predicted 9 of the last 3 recessions. Every decade has its "this time is different" moment that turns out to be manageable. Markets are more resilient than they look. Supply chains adapted to COVID faster than anyone expected. Europe survived the Russian energy crisis through conservation, LNG imports, and a remarkably warm winter in 2022. The global financial system has shock absorbers that were built specifically because of past disasters. And most wars, historically, don't end civilization. They create enormous suffering, real, devastating human suffering, but the economic disruption they cause, even the worst cases, tends to resolve over years rather than decades. So the honest answer to, are we headed for a 2026 economic crisis, is maybe. Probably not a collapse, possibly a serious, painful recession with geopolitical roots. Almost certainly a period of sustained volatility that will be hard to navigate if you're not watching it closely. The risk isn't necessarily a single dramatic event, it's the accumulation of small ones. Every Red Sea rerouting adds a little inflation. Every Iranian proxy attack adds a little risk premium to oil. Every defense budget increase means a little less spending on infrastructure and healthcare. Every emerging market debt crisis means a little less global demand. These things compound quietly, and then, one day, they stop being quiet. Here's the thing about wars and economies that nobody wants to admit. The modern global economy was not built for peace. It was built during wars, around wars, to finance wars, and in several important cases to make war economically inevitable by creating resource dependencies that powerful nations would fight to protect. The Bretton Woods system, which gave us the IMF, the World Bank, and the dollar's dominance, was designed at the end of World War II. NATO, which drives European defense spending, was built to contain a Soviet threat. The petrodollar system, which underpins America's financial dominance, was engineered in 1974, specifically because of the oil crisis triggered by the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. The architecture of the entire global economy has war baked into its foundations. So when you see oil prices move, when you see gold spike, when you see shipping costs quietly rising on the back of drone strikes in a sea you've never seen, you're not watching random chaos, you're watching a very old machine do exactly what it was designed to do. The question isn't whether war will affect the economy. The question is, who designed the machine? And are you inside it or outside it?